In the early 1950s, researchers exploring a cave near Prague in the Czech Republic found a nearly complete human skull at the bottom of a dark chamber. They named it Zlatý kůň, which means golden horse in Czech. The skull clearly belonged to a woman. Its shape suggested it was very old, possibly tens of thousands of years. But when scientists tried to date the bones using radiocarbon methods, the results came back inconsistent. It turned out that conservators had used bovine-based glue to piece the skull together decades earlier, and the cow DNA contaminated every dating attempt. For over 60 years, nobody knew how old she really was. But in 2021, a team led by Johannes Kraus at the Max Planck Institute and Cosimo Post at the University of Tübingen found another way. They looked at the Neanderthal DNA embedded in her genome. Modern humans who left Africa interbred with Neanderthals, and over generations, those Neanderthal segments get broken into shorter and shorter pieces. The Zlatý kůň woman still had unusually long stretches of Neanderthal DNA, longer than those found in the 45,000-year-old Ust-Ishim male from Siberia, who had previously held the record for the oldest sequenced modern human genome. Longer segments meant fewer generations had passed since interbreeding. She was older, possibly the oldest modern human genome ever reconstructed. Then in 2024, a study published in Nature connected her to 6 individuals buried in a cave called Ranis in Germany, 230 kilometers away. DNA analysis showed they were distant cousins, separated by at most 6 generations. Together, their genomes painted a picture of the very first modern humans to enter Europe. They belonged to a population of roughly 200 people. They had dark skin and dark eyes, consistent with recent African ancestry. And every single one of them belonged to a lineage that left no trace in any living person on Earth. Their entire branch of the human family tree went extinct roughly 40,000 years ago, possibly wiped out by the catastrophic Campanian ignimbrite volcanic eruption that devastated southern Italy and altered the climate across the northern hemisphere. The Zlatý kůň woman lived, had children or relatives, belonged to a community that crossed hundreds of kilometers of Ice Age Europe. They hunted, built shelters, made tools, and survived in a landscape shared with cave bears, woolly mammoths, and the last Neanderthals. And then her people vanished completely. If her skull had not survived in that Czech cave, we would never have known they existed. She is not the only one. In southern Romania, there is a cave system called Peștera Muierii, which roughly translates to Women's Cave. In the 1950s, researchers discovered the remains of 3 females inside. One of them, labeled Peștera Muierii I, died roughly 35,000 years ago. For decades, scientists noticed that her skull had features of both modern humans and Neanderthals, and they assumed she carried unusually high Neanderthal ancestry. In 2021, a team led by Matthias Jakobsen at Uppsala University sequenced her entire genome to 13.5 times coverage, one of the highest quality ancient genomes ever produced from remains older than 30,000 years. The DNA told a different story than the skull shape suggested. She had about 3.1% Neanderthal DNA, roughly the same as other early Europeans, and only half as much as the 40,000-year-old Peștera Oase I individual found in another Romanian cave. She was not the Neanderthal hybrid everyone assumed. What surprised researchers most was her genetic diversity. She carried far more variation in her genome than expected for someone living in Europe at that time. That finding overturned a long-standing assumption. Scientists had believed that the great loss of human genetic diversity happened when populations migrated out of Africa. The Peștera Muierii woman proved that diversity remained high until the last glacial maximum, the peak of the most recent ice age, roughly 20,000 years ago. The ice age was the bottleneck, not the migration. She also had a stronger immune system than almost any modern European. Less than 4% of living Europeans carry her combination of high immune response genetic markers. 35,000 years ago, she was genetically equipped to fight off infections that would devastate populations today. Her body was adapted for a world teeming with parasites and pathogens that have long since been tamed or eliminated. In a way, the loss of her lineage also meant the loss of immune defenses that took thousands of generations to build. And like the Zlatý Kun woman, she is not a direct ancestor of anyone alive today. She was a predecessor of the Ice Age hunter-gatherers who once roamed Europe, but her specific lineage was lost during the glacial collapse that reshaped the continent's population. Now move south, thousands of miles from the frozen caves of Europe to the Sahara Desert. Today, the Sahara is one of the most hostile environments on Earth. It spans 3.6 million square miles of sand, rock, and heat that can reach 122 degrees Fahrenheit. But 7,000 years ago, during a period scientists call the African Humid Period, this entire landscape was a green savanna. Rivers flowed through it. Lakes filled its basins, including one roughly the size of modern Germany. Hippos, elephants, and giraffes roamed the grasslands. And human communities thrived along its waterways. In 2003, archaeologists began excavating the Takarkori rock shelter in southwestern Libya, near the border with Algeria. The site sits in the Tadrart Akakis mountain range, a UNESCO World Heritage Site covered in thousands of prehistoric rock paintings depicting hunters chasing giraffes and herders tending cattle. Over the next 3 years, the team uncovered the remains of 15 individuals, mostly women and children, buried between 8,000 and 4,000 years ago. 2 of the bodies were extraordinarily well preserved. Their skin, ligaments, and tissues were still intact, naturally mummified by the dry desert conditions. Both were women in their 40s who died around 5000 BC. For nearly 20 years, scientists could only extract mitochondrial DNA from these mummies, the small fraction of the genome inherited solely from mothers. It was not enough to tell the full story. Then in April 2025, a team led by archaeogeneticist Nada Salem at the Max Planck Institute with senior author Johannes Krauss achieved something nobody thought was possible. They sequenced the first whole genomes ever recovered from human remains in a hot, arid environment. The results, published in Nature, were extraordinary. These 2 women belonged to a previously unknown branch of the human family tree. Their lineage split from sub-Saharan African populations roughly 50,000 years ago. Around the same time, other groups were beginning to migrate out of Africa. Then this group stayed isolated for tens of thousands of years. Their DNA matched no modern human population on Earth, not sub-Saharan African, not North African, not European, not Near Eastern, nobody. They carried only 0.15% Neanderthal DNA, far less than the 1.5 to 2% typical of Eurasian populations. That tiny trace suggests some rare, long-distance contact with groups outside Africa, but nothing sustained. They were pastoralists who kept cattle, and the site yielded pottery impregnated with milk fats, the oldest evidence of dairying anywhere in Africa. Yet despite adopting herding and agriculture, they did it without genetic mixing. Ideas crossed the Sahara, genes did not. Professor Krauss pointed out something haunting about the timeline. The Sahara only became green about 15,000 years ago. Before that, it was desert. So where this population spent the 35,000 years between splitting off from other humans and arriving in the green Sahara is a complete mystery. They existed somewhere in isolation for longer than all of recorded human civilization. And then they disappeared. The pattern repeats again in Siberia, in a cave in the Altai Mountains, where 3 different human species once lived. Among over 2,000 unidentifiable bone fragments excavated from Denisova Cave, a tiny sliver no bigger than a thumb tip was flagged as human in 2015 using a protein fingerprinting technique called ZooMS. Full genome sequencing revealed the fragment belonged to a girl who died roughly 90,000 years ago at around 13 years old. Her mitochondrial DNA came from a Neanderthal mother. Her nuclear DNA showed her father was Denisovan. Her Denisovan father also carried traces of Neanderthal ancestry from hundreds of generations earlier, proving this kind of interbreeding happened repeatedly across tens of thousands of years. Her mother's Neanderthal DNA was more closely related to specimens from Vindija Cave in Croatia, thousands of miles from Siberia, suggesting Neanderthals migrated across entire continents in multiple waves. She was the first and still the only known first-generation hybrid between 2 different archaic human species. Scientists nicknamed her Deni. Population geneticist Pontus Skoglund called the discovery absolutely extraordinary. 5 years earlier, in 2010, scientists at the same institute had sequenced DNA from another girl's pinky finger bone found in the same cave and discovered an entirely new human species, the Denisovans. To this day, Denisovans are known from only a pinky bone, a few teeth, and 1 jawbone found in a Tibetan cave. Yet their DNA lives on in billions of people. Modern Melanesians carry 4 to 6% Denisovan DNA. Both the Denisovan girl and Deni were female. Both belong to lineages that no longer exist as distinct species. And both were found in the same cold Siberian cave that has produced more revelations about human evolution than almost any other site on Earth. What ties all of these women together is not just their age or the fact that they were female. It is what their DNA tells us about how much of the human story has been permanently lost. Mitochondrial DNA is passed exclusively from mother to child. When a maternal lineage goes extinct through disease, displacement, population collapse, or simple bad luck, it vanishes forever. The Zlatykun woman's maternal line is gone. The Pestera Muyerii woman's lineage did not survive the Ice Age. The Takakori ghost population disappeared when the Sahara dried out. The Neanderthals and Denisovans are gone entirely. And there are lineages we have not even found yet. West African populations carry roughly 2 to 19% of their DNA from an unidentified archaic hominin that split from modern humans approximately 360,000 years ago. No skull, no bone, no tooth from this species has ever been discovered. It exists only as a mathematical shadow inside the genomes of living people. Somewhere in the deep past, an entire branch of humanity lived, reproduced, and vanished, leaving nothing behind except fragments of code in the DNA of their distant descendants. Every one of these women carried a world inside her, a population's history, a maternal chain stretching back thousands of generations. And when that chain broke, everything it carried was lost. We only know any of this because their bones survived long enough for science to catch up. If this changed how you think about human history, subscribe. We cover stories like this every week.